There's. Hello and good afternoon, everybody. I hope you are able to hear me. My name is Leigh Hancher. I'm hosting the debate today here at the Florence School of Regulation, at least virtually at the Florence School of Regulation. We're looking at an extremely important topic today, which is how to include Ukraine in the internal energy market, even although it is, of course, not a full member of the European Union, and there might be a long and quite rocky road to go before that goal can be reached. Of course, Ukraine is a member of the energy community, a treaty area, and we're lucky to have representatives from the Secretariat here today to discuss to what extent we can already take some steps, some key legislative, regulatory and market design steps to include Ukraine's energy market into the wider internal energy market within the EU. So I would like to, first of all, make a couple of housekeeping remarks. First of all, we're very lucky to have simultaneous translation today, and in the chat, you'll find, in the chat box, you'll find the instructions in English and in Ukrainian to activate the simultaneous translation. I'm afraid I can't do that myself, except in English, so please have a look at the chat. And the other remark I would just like to make is normally we do have polls in our debates, but given the political sensitivities and complexities, we thought, well, let's use the time for discussion and we won't have polls today. So I'd like now to turn the screen over to my colleague, Alberto Pototschnig, who will introduce the first part of the debate and our speakers today. Thank you, Alberto.
Alberto, you are muted.
So good afternoon, and thank you, Leigh, and welcome also from my side to this debate on what is missing for Ukraine to join and participate in the internal electricity and energy market. As you know, since the invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation army, repeated statements have been made in Europe at the highest political level about this prospect of Ukraine joining the European Union. And even the European Council the other day took note of the preparation of the Commission's opinion on the application of EU membership by Ukraine and Moldova and Georgia, and it will revert to the matter in its June meeting. Now, as Leigh mentioned, maybe Ukraine accession to the European Union will not happen immediately. There are clearly other steps to be taken, but there may be an opportunity before full accession for Ukraine to participate in the internal energy market, which at the moment already extend beyond the borders of the European Union. Norway is not part of the European Union, and yet is, in fact, it was one of the founders of the internal energy market. So why not also Ukraine join the internal energy market before accessing the European Union? So that's the topic of today. Where are we? What is missing? What needs to be done in order for this to become a reality? And would it make sense? As Leigh mentioned, we're really honored to have a number of very expert panelists and speakers on this debate today. In the opening part, we will have Olena Pavlenko. She's president of the DiXi group, a Ukrainian think tank. Then we were hoping to have Mr. Ushapovsky, Konstantin Ushapovsky, the chairman of the National Commission for State Regulation of Energy and Utility of Ukraine. Unfortunately, he's busy with other institutional business, but we are very lucky to have Ms. Olga Babii joining us to replace him. And then we have the perspective of the Energy Community Secretariat, Dirk, Buschle, Deputy Director of the Secretariat, will also join us before we turn into a panel which will be moderated by Leigh. So without any further ado, I would like to invite Olena to join us and to provide her contributions. And in case when it comes, in case you want to access the translation, there is a small icon with a world at the bottom of the screen, and if you click on it, you can choose the channel. You can either have English version or Ukrainian language. So, Olena, the screen is yours, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much for this great possibility to talk. I will share my screen. I hope you see the presentation.
Yeah, we can see it. Thank you very much.
So I will start probably with the assessment of how Ukraine is doing with the implementation of European legislation, and also the speed of to join the internal EU energy market in 2021. This assessment was done by the Energy Community Secretariat. So you can see that Ukraine was doing quite good. We had better assessment in the gas sector because we had traders, we had gas exchange, we had a possibility for import and export of gas. So there were quite a high rates, let's say, from the Energy Community Secretariat. We had less optimistic assessment in electricity because Ukraine still had issues with integration of renewables into the electricity market. There were also issues with liquidity, and also our transmission system operator was not certified. But nevertheless, actually, the assessment was not so bad, especially in comparison with other energy community contracting parties. Then between that assessment and today's discussion, the war started, and I just wanted to show you how much attention Russia pays to the energy sector of Ukraine during the war time. So just an hour after Ukraine started to work in isolated mode to join the ENTSO-E, Russia started the war. 7 hours later, the hydropower plant Kakhovska was captured. Then Chernobyl nuclear power plant was captured within 12 hours. And then all the time when we were working in the isolated mode, three weeks, Ukrainian citizens regularly received different social media posts asking to switch off the electricity, which created a sort of problem for our electricity system. Russia had 4 goals, I would say, when it attacked energy sector, and all of these goals had influence on the process of integration and will have influence on the process of Ukraine's integration to energy market. The first goal was to complete destruction of infrastructure, to cut off gas and electricity supply in Ukraine. DiXi Group monitors how many consumers actually on everyday basis are cut off from the electricity and gas. This is the graph which shows this, and you can see that sometimes there were up to 1 million consumers who did not have access to the electricity, which means that energy companies, instead of developing the networks, they have to pay attention to rehabilitation, to rebuilding the networks. How can we talk about smart grids now if we have to just connect people to the electricity and gas? The second goal of Russia was to capture strategic energy facilities. As I said, nuclear power plants were captured. There was also shells on research facilities. And now these power plants, they report they cannot actually do some reparation work on their sides, which means that the losses, financial losses for the sector are just increasing. Losses of Energoatom for 2 months were more than 1.2 billion. For Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, it's only material losses, $600 million. So all this money, could be spent for the development of the market, for the integration. Now we have to find this money to cover the damages which Russia created. Third goal is the cyber war. we had a number of cyber attacks which increased before the war and during the war. The main, I think, target is Ukrenergo. The cyber attacks tripled to Ukrenergo, and peak of the attacks were before the synchronization and invasion. And during the war, there were more than 300,000 cyber attacks on Ukrainian energy sector. But here I have to say that actually Ukrainian experience can be very valuable for the European energy companies for the future. Diversification, sorry, the fourth Russian goal was to blockade resources to Ukraine, especially fuel supply. Ukraine is 70% dependent on Russian, was 70% dependent on import of fuel from Belarus and Russia. Of course, they stopped export immediately, but they also actually destroyed a lot of infrastructure in Ukraine, like 27 oil depots, refineries, and petroleum stations. And they also organized a blockade of maritime ports. On the other hand, actually now Ukraine is developing much more fast its cooperation with European countries to be able to trade fuel with the European Union, not with Russia and Belarus. There were also some changes in the politics, policy, and regulation during the war. Of course, I have to say again that there was a synchronization with ENTSO-E. Ukraine confirmed its plans to implement Green Deal despite the war. And also energy community and Ukraine has developed a mechanism how to support energy sector on ad hoc basis. And I hope Dirk will say later more about this. There were also some decisions which influenced the energy sector, how it works now. First, some of the information is closed now. Just for example, there's a prohibited access to registries, and the government decision is not to procure, not to do procurements through ProZorro system. Also, we have increased regulation in gas and electricity markets due to support households and consumers. The PSO is, there is a prolongation of PSOs and moratorium on gas and heat tariffs. This is a draft law, but I'm pretty sure it will be voted. The regulation on fuel market, it was increased at the first few months, but now it decreased. The lack of liquidity, it's still a huge problem because we have less consumption, but we have less payments, 30% less from households, 50% less from business. And renewables are in really bad situation because they do not have money. And what even worse, a lot of renewables, they were located in eastern Ukraine and they are physically destroyed. And this is another big problem which we can discuss today. Maybe the regulator also can cover this issue. And the share of the state companies in this sector increased. The government passed to Naftogaz a network of gas stations, which were taken from pro-Russian oligarchs, and also assets of 26 gas distribution companies. They were transferred to Chornomornaftogaz, which is a subsidiary of Naftogaz, also from the pro-Russian oligarchs. And the state influence in the corporate governance also increased because the separate law was adopted a few months ago. I did this very subjective assessment based on the previous assessment of Energy Community Secretariat, what has changed. It's a bit provocative, but we have debates, so probably there will be some discussions around this. So my propositions or ideas are that Ukraine did better in electricity. We should have more grades and better assessment in the electricity because we joined ENTSO-E. We have now certified TSO. In gas, because of regulation, okay, we made some step backs, but it should be changed after the war finished. In oil, we did some progress because we are developing our cooperation with the EU countries and companies. In renewables, a sort of step back because of the situation with payments and physical damages. Energy efficiency, environment, and climate, well, I marked better because I'm pretty sure we will have less pollution, but not because we are doing better in terms of policy, but because we have a lot of industry which is physically destroyed. But again, it's not about the market. We can talk about this later. And what is missing for Ukraine to join the internally energy markets from the EU side? First of all, I would like to say thank you very much for the great solidarity which EU expresses and great help which EU provides, but we definitely need more. We need more to win the war, and we need more to faster develop our market. First, Ukraine needs candidate status of the EU. We talk about this today. Second, thank you very much for the oil embargo, which the decision which was made 2 days ago, but the gas still is on the table and Russia manipulates with gas policy. We still have to make some decisions there. Access to the European funds, again, we talked about liquidity, and Ukraine definitely needs support with this. In terms of gas market integration, Ukraine needs to include, the EU should include Ukraine's gas storages into the strategic reserves. We also would propose to reorient gas flows from Nord Stream to Ukrainian gas transmission system. It will help us to still be more integrated with the European gas market until there will be a decision to stop gas supply from Russia. Also, development of interconnectors between Ukraine, Poland, and Slovakia, and removing some regulatory barriers in some European countries, I mean Slovakia. In terms of electricity market integration, we need support to start commercial export and import of electricity from Ukraine to the EU. And also we need support in terms of CBAM regulation, because it will be so hard for Ukraine to meet such requirements. Also unblocking of maritime ports to enable import of fuel and inclusion of Ukraine to the decision-making process. What I mean, it would be good if Ukrainian minister could participate in the meetings of energy ministers of the EU to be able to at least provide some advices or hear some developments and discussions again, it will help us to be better integrated in the energy sector in the future. Thank you very much. I will stop now. I think I did my work 11 minutes. Sorry, please. Thank you very much, and we'll be happy to answer all the questions.
Thank you very much, Olena. Thanks a lot for providing really a good, wide perspective of where Ukraine is, the damage that it suffered from the war so far, and the road ahead. Today we will focus probably on a much narrower scope than the one that you have presented, because here we cannot address all issues regarding the future of Ukraine or Ukraine energy sector. Here we are focusing on Ukraine joining the internal energy market, and that in itself I think would be quite a boost to Europe and to Ukraine. So I would now, thanks a lot for this excellent opening presentation. I'm now turning to Ms. Olga Babii, who is replacing Mr. Ushapovsky. Unfortunately, he was taken to an important meeting, or he had to attend an important meeting. So I'm really, really grateful to Ms. Babii to be able to have accepted to join us at very short notice. So Ms. Babii, the perspective from the Ukrainian regulator on the prospect of joining the internal energy market. And thank you very much for joining.
Так, вітаю всіх. Після такої розлогої доповіді пані Олени, вона надала всі цифри і інформацію про те, що насправді сьогодні відбувається в Україні. І щоб ми зрозуміли з вами, що коли ми з вами зараз розмовляємо, десь на сході цієї години руйнуються наші мережі і руйнується наша інфраструктура. Я би хотіла звернути увагу, таке маленьке вступне слово, що ми під час війни повністю переоцінили підходи до поняття безпека. Тому що ми зрозуміли, що безпека – це дійсно енергонезалежність, але ми також, скоріш за все, після війни, після перемоги переглянемо підходи до захисту інформації, до обмеження інформації щодо об'єктів інфраструктури, і цей досвід, який ми який з нами відбувся спочатку, і ми ними досить серйозно відчували, тому що спочатку ми, як країна, рухались в напрямку прозорості, розкриття інформації про наші мережі інфраструктури, об'єкти критичної інфраструктури. Ми це все розкривали, робили публічним, плани розвитку робили публічним. Але потім під час війни ми зрозуміли, що ця інформація, яку ми вважали, вона мала бути публічною для загального розуміння суспільством, що відбувається, вона стала для нас в певні моменти війни критичною і дозволяла окупантам, росіянам нищити нашу інфраструктуру. Тому це такий ключовий виклик, який ми зрозуміли в доповнення до того, що сказала Олена. Я би хотіла сказати, щоб довго не розповідати, ми розуміємо зараз три важливих речі. Ринок електричної енергії в Україні під час війни довів, що та система ринку, яка була запроваджена з 1 липня 2019 року, втрималась під час війни. Ринок відчував дуже такі серйозні коливання. Перше коливання, яке відбулось, ми всі розуміємо, що сам попит зменшився на 30% фізично. В перші дні війни це падіння складало, перші тижні війни це падіння складало 45%. І саме після тих тестових випробувань щодо синхронізації з ENTSO-E наш оператор, системний оператор, довів, що навіть такими падіннями попиту ми можемо управляти і контролювати нашу енергосистему. Тобто це було таке підтвердження того, що наша технічна спроможність щодо синхронізації навіть в умовах війни є наднадійною. Дійсно, зараз після того, як відбулося, як у нас є в країні бойові дії, багато підприємств промислових проходять релокацію в Західну Україну, тобто повністю змінюється підхід до системи споживання електричної енергії в Україні. І ми чітко запевняємо, що наша енергосистема по відношенню до стану довоєнного має навіть з урахуванням зруйнованих установок генерації суттєвий профіцит. Цей профіцит зараз для нас складає до 5-6 тисяч мегаватт-годин на добу, і це прекрасна можливість для того, щоб наші європейські партнери, розуміючи профіцит нашої системи, могли мати доступ до електричної енергії через умови швидкої синхронізації. 16 березня відбулася повна технічна синхронізація об'єднаної енергетичної системи України з європейською енергосистемою, і станом до сьогоднішнього дня наш оператор системний доводить щоденно, що 50 Гц в мережі тримаються незалежно від наявності бойових дій, і щоденною, щодобовою, щогодинною зміною ситуації на станціях, які виробляють електричну енергію. Технічну спроможність ми довели. В контексті тих моментів оцінки дотримання Україною вимог щодо європейської інтеграції нашої енергетичної системи ми зробили значно більше, тому що станом на сьогодні наш оператор системи передачі сертифікований. Це була дуже велика командна гра уряду, Верховної Ради, президента і нас як регулятора, коли ми все зробили для того, щоб оператор системи передачі Укренерго був сертифікований. І тут хочеться подякувати прекрасній адвокації Дірка Бушле, який щодня нас, даючи нам зауваження і пропозиції, нам Секретаріат Energy дуже в цьому допомагав, і ми спільно змогли це зробити. Тобто ці речі ми вже зробили. Тобто фізично станом на сьогодні, технічно і організаційно українська енергосистема вже є частиною Європейського Союзу, якщо ми про це говоримо. Що нам необхідно зробити? Нам необхідно синхронізувати комерційні тепер питання, які виникають між нашими енергосистемами. Перше, це відновити транскордонні операції на основі явного розподілу пропускної спроможності з переходом до спільних процедур розподілу. Ми, як регулятор, зараз проводимо вже ці консультації спільно з секретаріатом Energy Community та зовнішніми консультантами проводимо ці напрацювання і розуміємо, що це така дорога з двостороннім рухом, коли ми зі своєї сторони будемо робити відповідні імплементації, а наші сусіди країни також будуть нам в цьому допомагати. Далі це призначення НЕМО та поетапне об'єднання наших РДН, ВДР України з ринками країн ЄС та впровадження неявних аукціонів. Тобто це питання комерційних обмінів, як будуть відбуватися саме комерційні операції між компаніями України та Європейського Союзу. І саме зараз перед нами стоїть великий виклик що ми як регулятор з самого першого дня війни забезпечили належний моніторинг діяльності ринку. Ми не зупинили свою діяльність, ми моніторимо діяльність всіх учасників, моніторимо діяльність всіх сегментів ринку, приймаємо оперативні рішення стосовно ліквідності тих чи інших сегментів. Ми не зупинили проведення перевірок та навіть відновили, перевели повністю в цифровий формат процедури розслідування щодо поведінки тих чи інших учасників на тих чи інших сегментах ринку. І ми все робимо для того, щоб той ринок, який ми заявили як лібералізований, відкритий перед Європейським Союзом, ми втримали планку якості, яку ми тримали до початку війни. Тобто жодний державний орган з 24 лютого не втратив контролю за ринком, і ми можемо щиро про це говорити, щоб наші партнери розуміли, що Україна тримає планку, незважаючи на умови, в яких вона знаходиться. Далі ми також розуміємо, що ми маємо поступово долучити ОСП України до платформи обміну енергії та резервами балансування, і також прийняти відповідно нормативні правові акти. Пріоритетними напрямками для нас сьогодні є впровадження процедур спільного розподілу пропускної спроможності міждержавних перетинів. Ми вже зараз, ОСП-регулятор, найближчим часом напрацюємо відповідні процедури, які ми приймемо на нашому рівні нашого законодавства, на рівні законодавства України, і сподіваємося, що ці країни-учасники Європейського Союзу підтримують нас в тому, щоб підтримати ці напрацювання та долучити Україну як повноцінного партнера європейського енергетичного ринку. Це дасть, ми маємо пояснити всім нашим сусідам, країнам, що якщо ми швидко синхронізуємо комерційні питання щодо перетоків, спільних аукціонів, об'єднання ринків, то країни Європейського Союзу отримують доступ мінімум до 2100 мегаватт-годин електричної енергії, яка зараз в Україні є профіцитною і є часто дуже витребованою для країн Європейського Союзу. Мало того, ми розуміємо, що Росія все робить для того, щоб для країн Європейського Союзу зростала вартість вугілля та газу, яка використовується в виробництві, в тому числі електричної енергії. І за нашими попередніми розрахунками, ця синхронізація і пришвидшення комерційних обмінів щодо продажу України електричної енергії на експорт дозволить вам на 17% скоротити використання російського газу саме для цілей виробництва електричної енергії. Тобто наша спроможність, наша профіцитність в даному випадку для вас є взаємовигідною. Наступне, на що я хотіла звернути увагу, Європейський Союз, країни Європейського Союзу ще рік тому почали говорити про те, що атомна електроенергія може прирівнюватись до зеленої електрики, так, тому що вона є більш безпечна. І я би хотіла наголосити, звернути увагу ще всіх, що саме ці 2100 МВт-годин, про які ми говоримо як потенційний продукт, який ми вже зараз пропонуємо, це саме і є та чиста електрика, яка необхідна для вашого ринку, тому що це в більшості атомна електроенергія. І це є важливим викликом для нас всіх, для того, щоб, розуміючи вигоди для всіх сторін, ми могли максимально швидко реалізувати ці, скажімо так, умовно-бюрократичні питання комерційного об'єднання наших енергетичних ринків. Якщо рахувати технічну спроможність та адміністративну, то Україна сьогодні вже частина Європейського Союзу. Нам необхідно просто доопрацювати питання комерційних обмінів, і ми стаємо повноцінним членом незалежно від того, коли ми отримаємо кандидатство. Тому ми як регулятор повністю відкриті до цих процесів, слідкуємо за цим, модеруємо дуже багато важливих речей щодо комерційних обліків, співпрацюємо з усіма, з ОСП, з оператором ринку, розвиваємо біржову торгівлю щодо ринку двосторонніх договорів, забезпечуємо належний 100% моніторинг поведінки всіх учасників і будуємо свою роботу так, щоб в подальшому все, що ми робимо зараз, могло бути синхронізовано максимально швидко відповідно до вимог та стандартів ЕЙСера. Тобто всі рішення, які ми сьогодні приймаємо, ми будуємо в моделях, які нам можна буде швидко і легко адаптувати. Також хотіла б звернути увагу на те, що Ми розуміємо, що для того, щоб стати повноцінним членом-учасником європейської енергетичної системи, нам необхідно імплементувати регламент 1227 реміт. І хотіла би розказати, що цей законопроект 4503, він уже зараз в Верховній Раді, він уже пройшов комітети. Ми очікуємо, що він буде найближчим часом прийнятий. І зараз паралельно ми як регулятор, не очікуючи прийняття цього законопроекту і розуміючи, що наявність реміту буде однією із умов комерційних обмінів України та країн Європейського Союзу, в тому числі товаром, яким буде електрична енергія, ми вже почали працювати, маємо чітку дорожню карту напрацювання наших нормативних актів вторинного рівня, які ми приймемо максимально швидко після прийняття закону, для того, щоб ми виконали зобов'язання в частині імплементації 1227 реміт. У нас є повне розуміння цього процесу. Ми дякуємо також Єврокомісії за те, що зараз в рамках проєкту «Кращі послуги для споживачів» ми отримали дуже гарних консультантів, які нам допомагають з підготовкою цих нормативно-правових актів. Повністю рухаємося по цим шляхом. Також би хотіла звернути увагу, що Україна в контексті енергетичної безпеки чітко розуміє наші переваги і наші можливості щодо застосування вимог СІБА. Ми як регулятор свого часу, розуміючи, що механізм вуглецевого коригування на кордоні, ставши повноцінним членом Європейської енергетичної системи, ми маємо застосувати. Тому ми повністю готові, ми маємо декілька моделей, як застосовувати ці рішення для тих учасників енергетичного ринку, які будуть продавати електричну енергію для європейського ринку, і як забезпечити швидке впровадження цього механізму, а саме видачу цих сертифікатів для того, щоб наші учасники, які будуть торгувати електричною енергією, могли бути забезпечені цим необхідним елементом, який є однією із умов синхронізації. І не буду говорити дуже довго, я готова відповісти на багато запитань, але хочу сказати, що ця війна нам показала наступне, що ми маємо все, що ми будуємо, будувати з запасом на 50 років вперед, думати на 50 років вперед. І вся наша система безпеки – це не тільки ціна газу, тому що ціна газу – це одне, але якщо зруйнована мережа і немає електричної енергії, то тоді ціна не має значення. А ще абсолютно чітко ми зараз зрозуміли, що не ціна газу, не ціна вугілля важлива зараз. Да? Можливо, для економічних контекстів це важливо, але найбільшою зараз стала ціна людського життя. І ми сьогодні повністю переоцінили те, що відбувається в контексті безпеки, зрозуміли для себе, що можливо зараз треба заплатити більше для того, щоб завтра мати енергетичну безпеку. Тому ми розуміємо, як регулятор, що нам треба зробити. Ми ще раз говоримо всім, що Росія – агресор, і її треба обмежувати в її енергетичних потужностях, тому що це гроші, які вона заробляє на війну. І наступне, що Україна є потенційним партнером для країн Європейського Союзу, яка готова найближчим часом продавати споживачам Європейського Союзу надійно мінімум 2100 МВт електричної енергії, і ми як регулятор і уряд спільно з нами готові все зробити для того, щоб виконати всі вимоги щодо комерційних обмінів даної електричної енергії. У мене все. Дякую.
Thank you very much, Ms. Babii. Thank you very much for joining us at very difficult times and in very difficult circumstances. We are really, really grateful to you. And I would like also you to share our gratitude to Mr. Oshapowski, even though he could not join at the last moment. The EUI, the European Universities, the Florence School of Regulation, have condemned the aggression of Russia to Ukraine, and we've been supporting Ukraine to the extent that we can. And today's debate is one initiative that we've taken. But the Florence School of Regulation has also offered free seats in our courses to Ukrainian staff of Ukrainian institutions, and also to Ukrainian students who want to enter or to develop further their skills in the energy sector. Thank you very much for sharing your perspective. Very interesting, very inspiring, I would have to say. And now I'm turning to Dirk. You should be somewhere there. You've been mentioned more than once. Thanks a lot, Dirk, for being with us today. What's the Energy Community Secretariat's view on Ukraine joining the internal energy market? Dirk, the screen is yours.
Thanks a lot, Alberto, and good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, Olena, Olga. It's great to see you all. And the greetings from Athens. I'm here at the Energy Community. So it is something that is also timely being discussed in Florence. And I'm happy to contribute maybe by doing something a little bit impertinent by rephrasing the question. I'm all for a catchy opening question, but I would say whether Ukraine is ready to join the internal market or not may have been a relevant question back in 2014, 2015, at the time when Ukraine had just joined the energy community. Maidan was making a big difference in terms of its political orientation. And what Ukraine did, we supported them, was to adopt a gas law in compliance with the third energy package. And the next thing that happened is that the Ukrainian company Naftogaz defended that third energy package in front of the Stockholm arbitration, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, arbitration battles ever had against Gazprom. And I think this is remarkable already because not many European member states defended the third energy package already at that point in time as consistently as Ukraine did. From a point of view of the energy community, things are relatively clear, if not to say crystal clear. Ukraine does not have to be integrated in the internal market. Ukraine is part of the internal market of the energy community, which is a community that comprises both non-EU countries and the European Union. So it is profiting from every access, right to access to the market, from non-discrimination to free movement of energy. And it is also an economic reality. In electricity, we heard about that, and we all are aware that before the war, there was electricity exports from the so-called Buschle island. We may and hopefully will go soon back to commercial exports, now also post-synchronization. In gas, there were imports ever since 2015. The storage, huge storage capacities of Ukraine have been made available in a commercial manner to Western partners. And this is something that's also rightfully so reflected in the recent gas storage regulation by the European Union. So also economically, there is no question that Ukraine has been and is, albeit under, of course, now very particular circumstances, a part of the European internal energy and electricity and gas market. Same goes for infrastructure. As we know, there is a big country like Ukraine is much more than just interconnected with its European neighbors. We heard and will hear more about synchronization, really a huge step for Ukraine, and maybe an even bigger step for Europe, because it replicates something that was at the very beginning of the European internal market as well. Technical integration as the nucleus for whatever comes next. And this will be significantly upgraded. So this rather technical interconnection will be significantly upgraded now in the framework of the energy community through a package, the full package of electricity network codes and guidelines, which essentially will put Ukraine in the map of, or on the map of, the pan-European and also regional configuration of the electricity markets. Market coupling will be the next step as soon as the circumstances allow. And also interesting, you, Alberto, Acer will for the first time play a decisive role in the governance of these integrated power markets by being given the competence to issue also binding decisions. Also inside Ukraine, I would say, and we heard this already from Olena, she made reference to our implementation report. The liberalization of the electricity and gas markets has well advanced, at least on the wholesale side. And I would even say it has advanced so well that the benchmark is not the other neighboring countries of the EU, but the benchmarks are really the EU member states. And in some cases, at least, I would even suggest that Ukraine is performing slightly better. One example illustrating that would be the unbundling, also has been mentioned already, of the two TSOs, electricity and gas. The gas TSO unbundling was a precondition for the new transit contract back in 2019. The electricity TSO unbundling was a precondition for synchronization, and Ukrenergo now being an observer in ENTSO-E. And in also this respect, I would say that in the Energy Community Secretariat, we probably have even applied a little bit stricter scrutiny even than the Commission would have done to their TSOs. So this is all well reflected, and I think it presents a true and fair view in the recent questionnaires for the application for candidate status. There are, of course, shortcomings, and I believe the next panel in particular, I already assume that Jan Haizmann is warming up, will point to them. There is no remit yet. There is still there is a high concentration on the market. Some kind of rather manual regulation, if I may call it that way, takes place with price caps, etc. On the retail market, we don't have to discuss much that this is, of course, highly protected. All in all, you have a mixture of high concentration, the fear and possibly also the reality of market manipulations, over-regulation, and a lot of social issues. So I leave it up to you to judge of whether this is something completely out of the European normality, reality, or whether it is manageable. I would suggest it is actually. And maybe what is also important, impressive, is that Ukraine managed to uphold these achievements. So liberalization, opening of the wholesale market in times of war. I don't think that many European countries, or at least, and thanks God, it has never been tested, whether that would be possible. And thanks to also this staying faithful in the most stressful of times to the European market design based on the third energy package and the clean energy package and on the network codes and so on. Thanks to this, Ukraine has managed to become even a part of a solution in these darkest times of its history. It is providing electricity now, for instance, to an equally challenged country, its neighbor Moldova, and could do also more to support the European market. Now, if at the beginning I said that the question is maybe not whether Ukraine should or what is missing for Ukraine to join the European internal energy market, then what is the real question? I think it is whether Ukraine is ready and will be ready. Now we are in, of course, a very particular situation, but will it be ready to join the European Union's latest policy updates? And that's the Green Deal, evidently, and the Repower Europe. It has started to engage in the Green Deal, obviously in the framework of the energy community. We have a decarbonization roadmap, which envisages also targets for 2030 on the three elements that also are being applied in the EU, being negotiated and adopted this year. Ukraine has also been given a very prominent role in the recent communications by the European Commission, for instance, on external energy policy. And it has a high potential, I think that's what we all agree, to support the European Union's decarbonization and also strategic autonomy goals at the same time. Think of hydrogen, but also think of joint gas purchase mechanisms that are being developed as we speak. These are all arguments that speak for not only letting Ukraine access and play on the internal energy market, but to take it that step further and higher. Evidently, there are a lot of challenges. Coal exit will not be easy. Nuclear is still under the fog of war. The renewables energy sector governance was notoriously bad before the war, and a couple of regulatory tools that we apply in the EU are missing in Ukraine, such as a serious carbon price. That's also something that has been mentioned. All of this will have to be seen, and I think this will be the really interesting part in the context of rebuilding Ukraine, so building back better, as they like to call it, which will open opportunities, but will also expose all these challenges. And what I believe, to conclude, is the biggest risk remains indeed governance, and actually not only from the Ukrainian side. So governance, we have heard already, and I mentioned it as well. There is a lack of institutional stability, reliability, maybe sometimes the risk of manipulations and other practices. That's the Ukrainian problem, and it will have to be addressed before reforms and money will flow into Ukraine post-war. But also the European side has to do its homework, and that's why this debate is so timely and important. We have to think of what kind of format to offer. Membership, yes, but if it is as delayed as it is in the Western Balkans or even longer, then this is not a useful format. So I think this debate also has to take place in the European Union seriously, not just among academic circles. And both questions, in the end, I think will have to be addressed, will have to be answered before we can engage into this full integration, not only in the internal energy market, but into the European energy policy, which these days has become so turbulent, and of which Ukraine can be much more a part of the solution than being considered part of the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dirk. I think for a very comprehensive assessment of where Ukraine is in the road to join the internal energy market. And as you mentioned, it's still part in some form, but there is still a lot to do before it can join in, fully. So this actually concludes the opening part. I think three very interesting presentation, three perspectives on Ukraine. And now pass the screen to Leigh to moderate the panel. Leigh, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Alberto. And I too would like to congratulate our three speakers for excellent and comprehensive presentations. And I hope indeed that in the panel we can reflect the last message, that Ukraine should not be part of the problem, but part of the solution. Now, I know that a couple of panel members are a bit pressed for time, so I'm going to invite our first panel member to give his presentation, as I know he's really pressed, and then I will introduce the following panel members. So I'd like to start off with Jan Haizmann from EFET, and I know that Jan has also got a presentation, so perhaps you'd like to kick off with your reactions to some of the speeches. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leigh, because I think because of the time, I will have to really leave in 10 minutes. I rather leave the presentation and just basically make a couple of points from the view of the trader market of what would need to be done in order to best integrate Ukraine into the European energy market. So I fully agree with the conclusions of Dirk here. Governance and reliability of institutions remain a major concern in Ukraine. So this is something that needs to be addressed, a proper way of cooperation, a positive spirit of cooperation, rather than relying on formal limits of competence. That would be really helping a lot in order to bring that market further towards the European markets. In the electricity market, we have seen an absence of a liquid forward market. It's in reality just a significant trading in the spot window. So that means also there is no hedging opportunities that could normally then be derived from such forward market. The RES market suffered terrible reputational damage that would need to be repaired. This is not getting any better. I think there is currently in Ukraine even a very high risk of insolvencies of companies that are involved in renewable generation. So that also then leads us to the next point, that the insolvency risks need to be properly managed in Ukraine. They are currently not managed. We've made suggestions on including closeout netting, and let's say what in reality would need is an insolvency reform. So this is obviously something the energy community would not take care of, but it is irrelevant in order to create confidence in this market. And confidence means also confidence in the rules, but it also means confidence in the commercial survival of the counterparties. And both is currently not there. And this is why the market really heavily has to rely on prepayment. And with prepayment, so meaning fully paid electricity or gas trades, you can just not build any market that has any liquidity. So there is a number of things that just need to be sort of picked up, and they were there before. I don't want to speak too much about war-related efforts. Of course, it's a terrible thing that is happening, and it also distorts or has suspended many of the reforms that were ongoing. But already before the war, on the electricity side, so the price setter really has been DTEG thermal plants. For the state-owned nuclear incumbent, there was really very little incentive to trade, and this is a structural problem with the buyer, with the guaranteed buyer, that would need to be looked at, I believe, whenever Ukraine is ready to look at it, because this is what obviously needs to be the precondition for any future strategy. When is Ukraine ready to look at these things? And in gas, I think there has been great advance, also excellent work done by the energy community in terms of promoting a platform, the Ukrainian Energy Exchange. A platform that provides for transparency, but still there remain also issues on governance, on rules, on documentation that is issued by that platform. And there is here again a need for a physical market to be created with a possibility to hedge future exposure. This exposure currently cannot be hedged in Ukraine. It needs to be hedged, or it was pre-war hedged at one of the Western marketplaces. And at least for the bigger companies, and the smaller companies just had no edge at all. And we're running, obviously, with the price volatility we have seen, into a very high risk of insolvency. So insolvency is a little bit the topic that surrounds, let's say, the Ukrainian energy market on the gas side and also on the power side. And obviously, if you don't have a proper insolvency protection system, you then obviously then need to do state intervention. So price caps, things like that has happened in gas and power, don't help. Certainly they don't help with market confidence. Also, there may are reasons for them to be imposed. The gas release would have helped, but I think it came too late. And here, I think for these gas release programs, I think there needs to be really some sort of clearing solution that needs to be operational. That was equally delayed. So we have seen a lot of delays also on the standardization side. From the experience I personally have made in Ukraine, it's not so easy to get people agree on something. Many things are over politicized for no reason. It ultimately is about a technical mechanic to agree on that helps everyone around the table, whatever the political color of the respective people are. So what we need to do, and I think that's the remaining homework looking forward beyond the war, is creating market confidence. Some of that has been lost. Continue our work on market transparency. I think a lot of that has been done, certainly in this field, but needs to be further strengthened. We need to work on standard products and contracts, and we need to create some form of liquidity that also then include a forward market. So this would be a little bit my wish list. I think on the structural side, Dirk mentioned Moldova. I think it would be good probably to have some sort of reverse flow regional that also will enable Moldova to have a more secure gas supply situation looking forward. And that would be it from my side. And apologies that I have to leave early. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was really very much appreciated. I'm sorry we put you in a bit of a spot. I know you did have a presentation. Thank you for putting all the effort into preparing it. And if you don't object, perhaps we can use it as well. We summarize the debates and we provide links often to PowerPoints. Let participants follow the debate again. So thank you very much indeed for your very helpful contributions. I think probably insolvency isn't just going to be a problem limited to one country in the current crisis. I think many regulators are looking at ways to have to deal with this problem. So it's increasingly an EU-wide problem, but I think it's obviously very important to resolve it. So thank you indeed for your contribution. And I hope we'll see you back again at another event soon. I'd like to turn now to the rest of the panel and to invite, first of all, we have from ENTSOG, Claude, Mangin, and then we have ENTSO-E from Sonya, and I hope I pronounce your name properly, Twohig. And finally, we have a representative from the Ukrainian Regulatory Office, and I hope again my pronunciation is reasonably accurate, Vladimir Kachuk. So we have still about 20 minutes for the panel discussion, and we can maybe then have a bit of time over for questions from the audience. So Sonya, would you like to perhaps react first? Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope you hear me well, Leigh.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. So thank you to you all. Thank you in particular to Alberto and the FSR team for excellent overview of the situation. And I guess I'd like to start by the provocative title of what's missing for Ukraine. I already see the glass half full for Ukraine, and of course we want to particularly recommend or appreciate their dedication and their commitment to Europe and to legislation, and especially the electricity and the internal energy market. ENTSO-E, as you know, has been quite busy since the start of this year, and even in last year, where we were preparing for the isolated tests, which took place in February, and then, as you all know, the war started very soon after. So we were presented with the challenge of requesting an urgent synchronization, and of course that culminated in the actual 16th of March decision. Of course, it was an important decision of the TSOs of Europe, but also to support in solidarity our Ukrainian colleagues, and of course Moldova, who is supported also by Ukraine. The main objective of the emergency synchronization was to support and to give frequency stability to Ukraine, since Ukrenergo is operating its power system under extremely difficult circumstances, which is the war. And the war has changed ultimately the timeline for synchronization, which was initially planned for 2023. But of course, Ukrenergo, given all of its challenges, was not able to implement at the time the system security measures that were agreed between us for synchronization. These are still the commitment. These are still on track for Ukrenergo, and we want to ensure that those are delivered, because they are related to system stability and to risks in terms of the damping of oscillations of the power system of continental Europe. And we want to make sure that those stability issues are managed going forward. So today we talk about capacity and we talk about trading, but of course underpinning it all is a physical system which needs to be well supported. And I guess one of the preventative measures that we have is therefore we've had to limit the flows between Ukraine and the neighboring TSOs, the neighboring countries. And this obviously limits the trading capacity at this point in time, but we do feel that this is a measure which can over time be alleviated. And after almost 2 months now of synchronous operation and close monitoring by the TSOs, we can certainly say that the system does appear stable, but it does have some stability limits in on certain occasions. And of course, we're in a very calm period now in terms of both the weather and the seasons, and we are in a low demand situation right now. And we know, of course, that with the weather changing in the winter coming in, that could change, of course. So in terms of Ukraine and exporting, we have also received a request in April to allow electricity trades between Ukraine and neighboring power systems. And at this point in time, the regional group of TSOs in continental Europe is assessing this request. A decision is expected on the 7th of June. And the decision, I can already anticipate, will say that, yes, it's positive. It's positive to allow increased exports, but on a conditional basis for the fulfillment of the measures that we have agreed between us under the synchronization project. What are those measures? Well, they relate to system stability. They relate to the participation in critical processes around coordinated security assessment, CSA process we call, the operational planning processes, imbalance settlement. I'm mentioning procedures and processes which are part of what we call the internal legislative framework for electricity now in Europe. And we know that Ukrenergo is committed to complying with these measures. There's also the real-time observability of the interconnections. And this is crucial for, again, security and going into the winter where more likelihood for increased events on the system in all jurisdictions. So in order to manage the technical risks, the import-export capacity has been limited, is being limited, but this will substantially increase in the next year in regards to, and in particular in 2023, when the 400 kV line between Poland and Ukraine would be in operation. So we do feel it's a very positive outlook in terms of trade and in terms of the physical connection. To comment on market rules, the TSOs believe that addressing regulatory aspects is, of course, a task for the Commission and for the energy community, and Dirk has explained today the steps that are being taken there. But equally, there's a very important aspect of the NRAs, the national regulatory authorities and member states of the regions, the neighbors surrounding Ukraine. In terms of capacity calculation and allocation, the TSOs do propose a two-step process. The first is in the short term. Once next week, the continental Europe TSOs approve that they can go ahead with the commercial exchanges, that the TSOs of the region in the short term would organize an allocation bilaterally. This means relevant TSOs on each border would need to define the capacity calculation process and the allocation rules to be applied. And of course, the NRAs, the national authorities, would need to agree to this. In the longer term, the coordinated capacity calculation and harmonized allocation rules should be applicable for all relevant borders, but there needs to be sufficient time to be provided to include these borders in the single allocation platform. And the capacity calculation and allocation rules will comply with core flow-based calculation. As you know, core flow-based goes live next week, and with the pan-European harmonized allocation rules. So in my view, the rules are set. It's just very much the timing now of the introduction of the allocations within the systems and the procedures to be followed. And so we want to just highlight today that for each of these steps described above, the relevant TSOs will perform the necessary actions and therefore will obtain the necessary approvals from the regulators. We, of course, need, again, the support from all of our regulators and all of our TSOs to deliver on that. But we feel very positive about that because we have seen that has worked very well in the past. So in summary, the calculation is focused on day-ahead times first and forward capacities, which require firmness. And therefore, we're more focused on the day-ahead capacities at this point in time and leaving the balancing and leftover day-ahead markets to a later time. I'd like to finish now, Leigh, by just saying that we are very supportive and very positive about the future for Ukraine and for Moldova, and we want to work with all the agencies to deliver and to implement as much along in the coming months ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sonya. Also, I think for a very comprehensive, short, very comprehensive overview of what's been achieved, what still has to be done, and ending indeed on a positive note, as we all, I think, share. So let me turn now to our next panelist, who is then from ENTSO-G. Obviously also equally important, Claude Mangin. Would you like to contribute to the debate? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everybody. So I will be brief because I will repeat what the previous speaker said. To respond to your question, I also think that the glass is half full and that Ukraine has already joined the internal energy market, at least for gas. The TSO has been unbundled from its mother company. He's member of ENTSOG as an observer for a long time. The main characteristic of the gas regulation has been implemented in Ukraine. The network codes, most of the provision of the network codes on capacity, congestion management, balancing and interoperability. Ukraine is connected to the European network with up to 56 million of cubic meter a day with its neighbors, and European EU shippers are already using the Ukrainian transmission network, the Ukrainian storage, so it's part of the European market. Regarding security of supply with the war, ENTSOG and the TSO of the region have daily calls with the Ukrainian TSO to monitor the situation, and so all this shows that Ukraine is well integrated to the European market. What can be improved? It's what you will discover in EFET slides. The trading platform and the spot and forward market can be deeper and more liquid. More topic that is more maybe on the ENTSOG side. So it's the interconnection capacity. Should that be increased or not? It's up to the market participant to have a say on that. But Ukraine can be used to bring more gas from west of Europe to southeast of the EU, or in the opposite direction from Turkey, Bulgaria, and Romania up to the rest of the EU. It depends of the market will. Then, as Dirk mentioned, the next challenge for Ukrainian gas regulation would be the Green Deal and the Fit for 55 package. On that point, there are some projects on hydrogen already in Ukraine, and we had the news that regarding the methane emission, the Ukrainian regulation will tackle that issue in the same way as the EU. So again, a positive message. You can always improve the market features, but Ukraine has already done a lot. Thank you.
Thank you again, also for the positive message indeed. But I think everyone is acknowledging their immense respect here for what has been achieved by Ukraine under these terrible circumstances. Now, we have some questions. Luckily, we still have some time for debate and discussion. Let me pick up some of the questions coming in. There is a question from Ola Svatsapsky on export capacity. and I think that that is perhaps an interesting one that's directed to Dirk. I don't know if you've been able to see it, Dirk. It concerns exports of coal-based electricity. If that is an issue that you would like to pick up on, if you're still with us.
Yes, I am, Leigh. I'm just
trying
to find the question and to read it. But maybe I just start improvising, generally speaking. If the question is about electricity generated from coal, as I understand from you, Leigh, then indeed this is a matter that has to do with the level playing field to be created between Ukraine and the EU member states. You know that there is not a really significant carbon price being applied in Ukraine. There is now, of course, from the European side, the discussion about CBAM. We have heard about that, and in the Ukrainian situation, that would be very difficult to apply, as we are in a force majeure constellation. So even more important is that the coal-based electricity, or any electricity for that matter, is being subject to a sizable carbon pricing scheme, and there is, I think, in the light of what we are discussing, a better regional integration or pan-European integration. Actually, there will be no better way than to move towards or integrating Ukraine into the European ETS as soon as possible, with some price control probably. But that could also be part of a reconstruction effort in the sense of the Green Deal. This cannot be done overnight. It requires preparatory work. But I believe that this is not so much an issue right now, as Ukraine is by far not the only country exporting coal-generated electricity into the internal market. That's something we got kind of used to, and at least until very recently. But it will have to be tackled in the context of the building back better. And I hope I was not completely besides the point in answering that.
Thank you. Thank you. Indeed, I think it's a big challenge, as you pointed out, but it's again not limited to the Ukraine. I now have another question to address to every member, in fact, of the panel and the speakers, and that's the role of renewable energy. And there's a request for some information on what that role might be. I don't know if maybe Olga, would you like to start commenting on that? Olena, sorry.
Yes, thank you. So as I said, because Ukraine had, for years, Ukraine had quite very generous feed-in tariff, and it rocketed the speed of development of renewables in Ukraine. On the one hand, it's definitely great because it helps Ukraine to move forward with decarbonization strategy. On the other hand, it created some problem with with the liquidity of the market, with the financial issues. So now, as we discussed, the problem is in place because on the one hand, renewables are in a very difficult financial situation. On the other hand, because most of them are located on the eastern Ukraine, there were cases when the renewable plants were destroyed. I believe, because Ukraine have to actually further develop the renewables sector within its strategy, and Ukraine confirmed it will move to decarbonization goals. We have to start, I believe, very, very deep conversation with the players, with those companies who are working on renewables projects in Ukraine, and I believe start from the scratch how to develop this sector, how to support it, and where and who actually from international donors and partners could help Ukraine. And I think if we talk about support to Ukraine in renewable sector, the European partners could be the key partners who can step in and help to develop new schemes of support, and also discuss how to deal now with those renewables plants which are totally destroyed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think building again there, thank you on your own excellent presentation. And we have another question coming in from Natalie Samovic. Within the context of Rebuild Ukraine, she would like to know what are the top priorities for the energy community, as this was mentioned many times today, and she'd be interested to hear some thoughts on that. So maybe not to ask the energy community first to respond, but to ask the panel members if they were in the shoes of the energy community, how would they like to see these priorities being organized? So would any of the speakers or panelists like to comment on that question?
Yeah, I can start. Oh, Sonya, you want to start?
No, go ahead, Claude, thanks.
So, yeah, on the gas side, Ukraine is well known for the storage capacity. So those storage can also store hydrogen. So it's one question. Maybe for the future, then we are talking a lot about carbon capture and storage. And for the time being, we have pilot projects in ports on the west coast of Europe. And then they want to move the CO2 via ship into under the water. And so maybe in Ukraine, there are also some other storage to store CO2 that will be stripped out of the methane so that you have blue hydrogen flow. Again, it's just a question mark for Olena. And yeah, and we talk a lot about the price of the wheat and the strength of the Ukrainian agriculture. So maybe also on biomethane, what is the landscape there?
Thank you very much. Then I'll collect some more questions, and I think Sonya was anxious to jump. Yeah, I just wanted to say that the key word in the question from Natalie is priorities. You know, the priorities right now are under a situation which is unprecedented in terms of war situation. So the priorities are related to equipment and the communities providing support to Ukraine directly. Of course, that will move on once things move on, and therefore we'll move into more practical sort of building relationships between stakeholder groupings. And of course, the energy community has a very strong framework there that, you know, what I call the business as usual that can be leveraged here. So for the moment, it's about, you know, rebuilding the infrastructure and making sure the infrastructure works as best it can, especially going into the winter period. So those would be the priorities. So we are, all the TSO community in particular, and the DSO community are working very closely with Ukrenergo and with agencies in Ukraine to support them in the rebuilding of various infrastructure. So all stakeholders really play a part here, you know. I see a question with regard to the response of Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia to huge amounts of electricity. There's even right now with the interconnection, the maximum that can be exported, if it could be exported, and again I explained that there are technical limits right now, is up to 1,000 megawatts. So at this point in time, the physical connection, the physical exchange is up to that limit, is up to that maximum. So, and obviously can be increased next year, like I said, with regard to the new 400 kV line. So we're not going to see significant amounts of exports. We're just seeing up to at least 1,000 megawatts, you know. So I don't see it being a major concern of the neighboring countries. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sonya. I think that also answers the question from Orla to Ms. Ms. Babii, but maybe she would like herself to comment if she's still on the call. Maybe just waiting for the interpreter to clarify.
I think Dirk raised his hand later on as well.
In the meantime, yes, go ahead, please.
Thanks. No, I just wanted to come back to this prioritization question. We at the energy community, we don't really engage now so much in designing these big designs and plans for after the war. That's something that everybody does, but for now it is, as Sonya also has said, it is support. This is a test also for something that I personally see as a priority, namely to test the institutions in Ukraine and to see whether the governance, where it needs to be improved, to be prepared for a much bigger wave of support and this integration of Ukraine into Europe on all levels. We have established a fund to support Ukraine. There's also a lot of hands-on support, donations that need to get across the border. It tests the European system, I must say. It's also not easy to manage the logistics, but it's also a true litmus test for Ukraine. And what I know is very high on the agenda of Ukrainian colleagues, those working in the sector, is to just do something as basic as collect evidence for the damage done and for all the destructions, because at some point the need for rebuilding and the financial need will be significant, and it is important to keep track on what needs to be rebuilt, and probably also on who needs to pay for that.
So building back better is going to be important, and their priorities could well come in. There is a link from Bruce Chisholm and news from Canada. I don't know, Bruce, can you, if you want to
Yeah, I'm sorry, but Olga would like to answer.
Ah, good, thank you. In the meantime, Olga has now
Якщо
given the
дозволите, я
translation.
хотіла прокоментувати Дірка стосовно обліку об'єктів, які зруйновані, та збитків, які завдані. Зараз вже Кабінетом міністрів розроблена постанова, відповідно до якої учасники ринку фіксують зруйновані об'єкти, тобто мережі, об'єкти генерації та все інше. Ця фіксація відбувається. Наступним кроком, я думаю, що близько тижня часу ми вже зробимо методику оцінки цих руйнувань, а також паралельно ми з Кабміном, в тому числі регулятор, вже розробили та прийняли методику обліку не тільки технічних втрат, а й комерційних втрат операційної діяльності. Тому що хочу звернути увагу всіх, що зараз в контексті того, що частина наших територій є окупованими, але на цій території здійснюється безперебійне постачання ресурсів для запобігання гуманітарних катастроф, тобто постачання електричної енергії, постачання газу, постачання води. Ми належним чином вже напрацювали методику обліку втрати цих ресурсів та неотримання плати за це, і скоріше за все найближчим часом будемо звертатися за підтримки, я думаю, Олени Павленко та всіх інших до Європейського Союзу стосовно розгляду питання можливих компенсацій цих збитків через репарації. Зараз ми вже над цим працюємо, у нас вже є моделі концепції, є вже багато напрацювань, і ми вже навіть доходимо до етапу оцінки і фіксації цих обсягів. Тому найближчим часом ми цю всю інформацію надамо, будемо обмінюватися нею в тому числі Energy Community, можливо, ви нам надасте якісь поради, як нам краще в контексті міжнародного права рухатись в цьому напрямку. І ми з цим працюємо, готові до цих викликів і розуміємо, що за цим будуть серйозні наслідки, і ті, хто це зруйнували, мають за це заплатити. І ми вже це обліковуємо.
Much for those remarks. I think now we're moving towards the closing minutes of our really fascinating session. I would just like to turn to Alberto to see if he perhaps has a question that he would like to ask, having put together the event and been very active in getting everything set up today.
Well, thank you, Leigh. Well, maybe one question which was also submitted in the Q&A facility. I mean, what is the next step in in the process because a number of issues have been raised. The glass is clearly half full, but there are still issues to be addressed. And what can we do tomorrow to bring forward the process of Ukraine fully integrated into, because there are already exchanges, but I think we cannot talk about Ukraine being fully integrated in the internal market. So I would actually propose, if you, Leigh, are happy with it, to give 30 seconds to each of our speakers and panelists. So what is top of your list in terms of things that can be done tomorrow, or the first thing in the list, in remaining list? So maybe we go through in the same order. So we start with Olena, Ms. Babii, Dirk, and then Sonya and Claude.
30 seconds each, I think.
Indeed.
First, I think we have to deal with the immediate needs, because this war, including energy war, still didn't end. So we all, including Ukraine, have to now be ready for winter season. And I think a lot should be done there in terms of cooperation between Ukraine and the EU. Again, I'm talking about gas storages and other things. Second, I think after the war, immediately when it stops, the Ukrainians, what is needed from Ukrainian side, I think it stepped back with this regulation, which over-regulation, which is normal in a wartime, and what will need to be weakened in the after the war, and probably discuss this issue with transparency, because we heard Ms. Babii that there is a question of security with opening this information. On the other side, there is a remit regulation and remit demands, which also demand to share a lot of information. From the EU side, I provided just a list of needs from which Ukraine needs. And I think what is needed is to allow Ukraine to have more access to the funding support, and also to the trading possibilities. That's what will give Ukraine not only aid, but also will help Ukraine to do business with Europe as a partner. Thank you.
Thank you, Olena. Mrs. Babii, if you can still hear us.
Ми усвідомлюємо, що зараз Україна знаходиться ще в умовах тестової синхронізації. І сьогодні, завтра і післязавтра ми максимально швидко маємо зробити все з двох сторін, щоб ця тестова синхронізація закінчилась, тому що наявність тестової синхронізації нам не дозволяє перейти до комерційних обмінів. Ми це розуміємо. В умовах тестової синхронізації комерційні обміни є досить складними. Це таке перше завдання, і ми просимо всіх регуляторів, представників, всі органи, від яких Європейського Союзу, від яких залежить це рішення, допомагати нам в цьому. Завершення тестової синхронізації, перехід до комерційних обмінів дозволить Україні експортувати електричну енергію, відповідно отримувати кошти і відповідно підтримувати ліквідність енергосистеми. І те, що сказала пані Олена, нам треба думати про те, що скоро опалювальний сезон, зима, і на європейських енергетичних ринках також буде зростати додаткова потреба в електричній енергії. Це такі ключові завдання. З іншої сторони, ми розуміємо, що сьогодні і зараз нам вже треба щиро сказати всім, оцінити наші збитки, оголосити їх і попросити підтримки європейських колег щодо прискорення стягнення завданих збитків для того, щоб ми могли почати відновлювати нашу інфраструктуру та відновити нормальну ліквідність на енергетичних ринках, ринку газу, електричної енергії. Це, на мою думку, те, що треба робити зараз. І ми дякуємо вам за те, що ви нас підтримуєте щодня, і сподіваємося на те, що ми далі будемо рухатись в такому контексті.
Thank you very much, Ms. Babii. Dirk, 15 seconds then.
I guess these two things are the most important: commercialization of export to the extent technically possible, to help Ukraine helping itself, and preparing for the winter, because that could be a big humanitarian disaster if it's not prepared already now.
Thank you very much, Sonya. 15 seconds.
Yes, I think it's very clear for us. We have decisions to take next week. The TSOs have decisions with regards to the commercial exports and allowing a gradual increase of exports with the preconditions that would be set and agreed with Ukrenergo for implementing various measures on their side. So we're working very well. We're working very, very fast, to be fair, and we feel very positive about the next months ahead. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sonya. Claude.
The most critical will be the next winter, and so we should fill the Ukrainian storage this summer, so to be ready next winter. And to do that, we should continue to use the Ukrainian and European transmission network and storage. Thank you.
Thank you. Leigh.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that's it's brought us to the end of our session, indeed. My priority, I think I'm very intrigued by the governance challenges, but that's perhaps also, and I think, as Dirk rightly said, a wider challenge. I was also very taken with Olena's comments about the dangers of over-regulation. So there's a lot to be done, not just for the Ukraine or in the Ukraine, but EU-wide as well, when we're responding to the current crisis. Thank you.
Okay, well, I guess we got to the end of this session. I would like to, well, thank Leigh, who's always, we work together in organizing these debates. I would like to thank all the speakers and panelists that join us today: Olena, Dirk, Miss Babii, and Ian, who had to leave, Claude, and Sonya. Thank everybody for joining us today. Thanks to the interpreter that provided simultaneous translation that allow us to all of us to understand what we were saying, and hopefully also help the audience, which I believe was both from the European Union, but also we had a number of Ukrainian registered for today. And last but not least, I would like to thank Gazi and Olena, who have been working to make this possible. And this is actually probably the last debate of the series that Leigh and I organize. I'm not sure we will have one in 4 weeks' time. We'll see if there is an interesting topic urgent before the summer. Otherwise, we'll resume after the summer break. And so let me wish everybody a good summer. Hopefully the war in Ukraine will stop soon and we can start thinking of a better future for